Clearing the Air, a hopeful guide to solving climate change. Written by Ritchie. Introduction. When the world burns. The sky is thick with smoke. Wildfires roll across continents once thought immune to such heat. In one corner of the world, a farmer watches his crops shrivel. In another, coastal homes vanish beneath the rising tide. These are not distant warnings. They are today's weather. The world, it seems, has stepped across a line where the crisis is no longer theoretical. Yet within this chaos, something remarkable is happening. Data tells a story not of collapse, but of progress. For decades, climate change was described as an unstoppable march toward catastrophe. But Ritchie begins by questioning the fatalism that has long dominated this conversation. She argues that fear, though powerful, often clouds reality. The data paints a different picture, one where emissions can be curbed, technology can evolve, and nations can change course faster than anyone expected. To understand this new story, we must first look at how humanity got here. The Industrial Revolution lit the fire. From coal to oil, the engine of modern life was powered by carbon. The great paradox of progress is that every light switched on, every factory built, and every mile travelled brought us comfort at the cost of the atmosphere. Yet Ritchie reminds us, the same ingenuity that created the problem can also solve it. Human innovation, when directed with purpose, can shift the very trajectory of history. The opening question becomes clear. What if we are not doomed, just delayed? If change is possible, the challenge is not simply technological, but psychological. To act, people must first believe that action matters. And belief, Ritchie insists, must begin with truth. Chapter 1. Seeing the World as It Is. Hope begins with clarity. Much of what people believe about climate change is shaped by emotion, not evidence. Ritchie's approach is to strip away distortion and show the world as it actually is, complex, imperfect, but improving. Data, she suggests, is not cold. It is the language of reality. When read with honesty, it reveals progress that pessimism ignores. Global carbon emissions have risen, yes, but their rate of increase has slowed. Some regions have already peaked. Renewable energy is no longer a fringe experiment. It is a growing share of the global grid. Millions of people now live in nations that generate more power from wind and solar than from coal. These shifts are quiet revolutions, happening beneath the noise of despair. Still, the data is not a lullaby. It does not deny the suffering that climate change inflicts. Instead, it offers perspective. The worst outcomes are not guaranteed, and small victories matter more than they appear. The battle is cumulative, progress measured not in headlines, but in gigatons, policies, and habits. By understanding this, people reclaim a sense of agency. Seeing the world clearly also means letting go of purity tests. No country, company, or individual will solve everything alone. But Ritchie insists that collective imperfection can still drive monumental change. The story of climate progress is not a tale of saints. It is the story of flawed humans making the best decisions they can, one step at a time. Chapter 2. The Myth of Individual Helplessness. Many people feel trapped between guilt and paralysis. They recycle, avoid plastic, and skip flights, yet the scale of the crisis dwarfs their effort. Ritchie confronts this feeling head-on. She argues that while individual choices matter, they matter most when they connect to systemic change. A single person cannot decarbonize a planet, but millions of small decisions, aligned with better policy and technology, can tilt the balance. This reframing is liberating. The point is not to shame or glorify personal virtue, but to direct energy where it truly counts. For instance, dietary shifts, eating less red meat, reducing waste, have measurable climate benefits. Similarly, choosing electric transport or supporting clean energy policies amplifies the signal of demand. Change begins with intention, but it scales through systems. Ritchie's analysis is practical. Most emissions come not from consumers, but from the infrastructure that supports them: power plants, factories, transport networks. Therefore, the path to transformation lies in reshaping these foundations, not merely policing habits. Awareness without reform becomes noise. Awareness linked to action becomes force. Yet she doesn't dismiss the emotional side. Individual action creates identity, a sense of belonging to a movement larger than oneself. This too matters. When people believe their contribution counts, collective momentum builds. The myth of helplessness dissolves when citizens see themselves not as victims of the system, but as its architects. Chapter 3: Energy, Innovation, and the Race to Zero. At the heart of the climate story lies energy, how we produce it, consume it, and reinvent it. Ritchie chronicles the technological revolutions that have redefined what is possible. Wind turbines spin in once empty plains. Solar panels line rooftops from Nairobi to New Delhi. In just a decade, the cost of solar power has fallen by nearly 90%, making it one of the cheapest energy sources on Earth. The old logic of fossil fuel dependence is cracking. But innovation is not just invention, it is scale. A breakthrough that cannot reach billions achieves little. Here lies the challenge. Transitioning the world's energy system requires patience, capital, and coordination. Yet Ritchie points to examples that inspire optimism. Nations like Denmark, Portugal, and Costa Rica are running almost entirely on renewables during peak times. Electric vehicles have gone from novelty to norm, with global fleets multiplying each year. The shift, however, is uneven. Some countries still rely heavily on coal, trapped by economic constraints. Ritchie emphasizes fairness. Climate progress must be inclusive. Developing nations cannot be asked to sacrifice prosperity for purity. Instead, wealthier economies must lead the transition, investing in technology, financing adaptation, and sharing innovation. Global justice is not separate from climate success. It is the condition for it. The race to zero emissions is not merely about cleaner energy. It is about rewriting humanity's relationship with power itself. For centuries, civilization's growth depended on burning the past. The future, Ritchie insists, depends on learning to grow without destruction. Chapter 4: The Food We Eat, the Planet We Shape. Few realize how much of the climate story lies on our plates. Agriculture accounts for roughly a quarter of global emissions, and much of it comes from how we grow food, not just what we eat. Ritchie explores this connection with nuance, without judgment, but with evidence. Livestock farming, especially cattle, produces vast amounts of methane. Deforestation to make room for crops destroys carbon sinks. And yet, the world still wastes nearly 1/3 of the food it produces. Solutions exist, but they require reimagining the global food system. Precision agriculture, plant-based diets, and regenerative farming all offer paths forward. But change is cultural as much as technical. In many societies, meat is tied to identity, celebration, or survival. Ritchie calls for empathy, understanding that behavior shifts slowly, but policy can accelerate the process. Technology, again, is the quiet hero. Alternative proteins, vertical farms, and climate-resilient crops are no longer science fiction. They are emerging industries that could redefine what sustainable abundance looks like. Reducing emissions from food is not about deprivation, she says, but designing systems that align appetite with ecology. The deeper question is one of fairness. How can a world that still struggles with hunger talk about eating less? Ritchie's answer is balance, ensuring that progress in one region does not deepen inequality in another. Climate action succeeds only when it also feeds, uplifts, and dignifies. Chapter 5. Beyond Doom, the Psychology of Hope. Despair is easy. Hope, Ritchie writes, is harder because it demands responsibility. Many people, bombarded by headlines of disaster, lose sight of the quieter truth that change is underway. She dismantles the doom narrative, arguing that pessimism can paralyze as effectively as denial. When people believe the world is doomed, they stop trying to fix it. Hope, however, is not naive. It is evidence-based confidence in possibility. Ritchie shows that global deforestation rates are slowing, renewable capacity is doubling, and clean technologies are becoming cheaper than dirty ones. The future is not secure, but it is open. And that openness is humanity's greatest asset. Culturally, pessimism often masquerades as intelligence. To sound serious is to sound bleak. But Ritchie flips that script. Genuine seriousness means facing data, not drama. To be hopeful is to be informed. The emotional challenge of our time is to believe in progress without denying peril, to look at the flames and still see a path through them. In the end, hope is not the opposite of fear, but its evolution. Fear wakes us. Hope moves us. What defines the coming century is not whether the planet burns, but whether humanity can learn to breathe again. Chapter 6. Clearing the air. What does it mean to clear the air, not just literally, but morally and intellectually? For Ritchie, it means clearing away confusion, polarization, and paralysis. The climate debate has become a battlefield of emotions, but the way forward demands humility and precision. Science cannot make people care, but it can make them understand. And understanding, in turn, can make care rational. She envisions a world where climate action is not an emergency sprint, but a steady climb. Each generation inherits a cleaner foundation from the last. Fossil fuels become relics of an age that mistook energy for smoke. Children learn not just about crisis, but about progress. That the story of humanity's future is one of repair. The air clears when misinformation fades, when policies align with reality, when progress is measured in life expectancy and clean air, not just CO2 charts. The task ahead is vast, but not impossible. As Ritchie writes, we can build a future worth living in, not because we must, but because we can. Conclusion. A new atmosphere. The climate story, at its core, is not about weather. It is about will. The same forces that shaped civilization, curiosity, cooperation, invention, are now being called upon to save it. The evidence shows that progress is not hypothetical. It is happening in cities where smog has lifted, in nations that have banned coal, in households that power their lives with sunlight. What has changed is not the challenge, but the perspective. The world no longer needs to be convinced that climate change is real. It needs to be convinced that it is fixable. That conviction is the emotional heart of clearing the air. It replaces despair with data, guilt with agency, and panic with purpose. When the smoke clears, when the fires fade and the air grows quiet, what remains is possibility. Not perfection, but progress. Humanity's greatest discovery may not be the steam engine or the microchip, but the realization that we can correct our course. The atmosphere, after all, is not just around us. It is within us. Shared, fragile, and for now, still breathable. Thanks for listening.
Did you enjoy this book summary? Got ideas on how we can make it even better? Drop us a quick note. We're always listening and learning from you.